so long to recover.
Hey everybody, it's been a while since I've done one of these. I think the last one was maybe in November. I had intended to get one out in December, but kind of got caught up with real life, and these Q&As have kind of taken a bit of a back burner. So today I wanted to do kind of a mega Q&A to catch up on all these things, and I've collected a bunch of questions from all the great people that have supported me through Patreon, and especially the people that are participating on the Discord channel. So all these great questions are coming from those people, so thank you so much to all those people. Your support means so much because nobody has to do any of this, but they want to, and they enjoy the content that I'm creating, so I do these as a way to sort of give back in some way. So thank you again to everyone who's supported there. So the first question comes from Squirrel, and he said, just finished the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Do you find there is a relation between Zazen practice and b-boy practice? Or rather, can Zazen be applied to breaking practice or in general? So for people who don't know, Zazen is basically the act of like seated meditation within the Zen Buddhist discipline or practice or whatever. And I think there's a huge relation between the two depending on how you approach practice, your breaking practice. So kind of like the goals of Zazen, or just meditation in general, is not necessarily to clear your mind or whatever, but it's just learning to be and not like fixate on thoughts and hold on to them. It's kind of like you sit, you let your thoughts come in, and you learn to like kind of accept them, welcome them, don't force it out, and don't try and make it happen. Don't try and make thoughts happen. These are the thoughts that are happening without any of your effort or whatever. You accept them, you let them come in, you let them stay in your mind for as long as they need to, and then you let them go, and you don't force it any longer than it has to like, you just learn to let it go. You don't try and make it stay. It's kind of hard to think about, but it's the kind of thing that, especially in the beginning, your mind is still active and it's still in this sort of different mode where it's trying to think and stuff. And the more you just learn to sit, the more, I don't know, like your mind just gets bored, and then you start to get into this semi daydream state where things are just happening. And you get this kind of thing in all kinds of different activities. A lot of times where you revert to something that just is so basic to you. So like you don't have to think about it, that your mind is free to just kind of do these things, but it's occupied by something else, like say washing the dishes, or when you're in the shower or something like that. You know, it's like brushing your teeth. You don't have to think about any of these things, so your mind is really free to just kind of wander. And the more you get used to, say, meditation, of just sitting and focusing on your breath and just breathing, giving yourself something conscious to focus on, to kind of like focus your mind a bit until it becomes sort of unconscious. But breathing is already kind of unconscious, right? So it's that kind of thing, like putting yourself into that kind of state. And breaking practice can be that same way. It just depends like how you decide to approach it, and it can be very meditative. So whether you're doing freestyle or just practicing sets and stuff like that, it's kind of like, if you can have that same approach of letting things, not being so necessarily fixated on it has to go this way or it has to go that way. How come it's not going this way? And it's kind of like, say if you're working on sets, like managing your expectations, or if you're doing freestyle, same kind of thing, like, you know, oh, I made a mistake, and you're fixated on that mistake, or you did something, you know, and this other person was watching or something like that, like, you know, at the end of the day, it's like learning to let go of those things, learning to let go of any expectations or any whatever, and just feeling sort of free, I guess, in your practice. And that's, I guess, maybe in a more freestyle way, but for example, if you're doing sets, like, you know, some people get into that state of mind where you're just sort of focused on, you have a very clear goal, you've given yourself a clear goal, and your skills can kind of match up with what your goal is, what you're trying to do. So there's a bit of that skill versus challenge, and like we're kind of getting into a bit of like talking about what flow is, but it's kind of the same. They're very related in my opinion. So I guess practicing meditation is teaching you like a mentality of just being and learning to just do the thing that you're doing, which is, in meditation, is just sitting and breathing. And then your thoughts are, and not learning to not focus on your thoughts. And breaking can be the same thing, whether it's you give yourself very clear, defined goals that your skills can match up to. And if they don't match, that's when you start to get sort of weird expectations, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not living up to what I wanted to do. And I mean, even to an extent that can be motivating, but too far, and you know, it can be detrimental. So that was a super long-winded answer, but yeah, there's definitely a relationship between the two, and they're kind of the same things, just being practiced in different ways. Especially with breaking, it depends on how you approach it, I think. So second question also comes from Squirrel, and he wanted to know, how did you get your b-boy name? So this is kind of a ridiculous story, and I think if anyone's listened to any of the interviews, I think I mentioned it in the one with Reflex. We got into just kind of the silliness of names and where they come from, but my name actually comes from a Denny's drink. So my breaking name is Razzy D, sometimes just Razzy, but Razzy D, D is for Dean. A while back there was a like Denny's drink, and they had a special on, they were promoting it, and it was called the Raz Dango. And two people from my crew, Nathan and, I think it was Nathan and Mark, they were at the Denny's, and maybe some other people were there too. And they saw this word Raz Dango, and they were like, oh, that's such a crazy name, that sounds so cool, like that would be great if that was someone's like breaking name or something like that, or if we could switch it to some, make it kind of breaking-ish, or I don't know, whatever. And they started playing around with it. They were like Razzy M, oh that sounds stupid, Razzy N, no that's dumb, or Razzy D. And after that, people started calling me that. They were like, we found a new name for you, you're Razzy D. And I kind of had no say in it, and I actually didn't really even like it at the beginning. I was like, this sounds stupid. But now it's kind of one of those names that's, you get called it long enough, and you kind of, I didn't have any other name, and I thought it was stupid to give myself a name, because I was taught the tradition is you don't give yourself a name, you get given a name. So I refused to give myself a name, and just kind of learned to live with the ridiculous name of Razzy D. But now it's kind of stuck, and in some ways it's taken on its own meaning, and so some of my crew will say like, oh, that's like Razzy style, that's looking Razzy or something like that. And it's become, at least within our crew, it's like connected with a certain way of moving, which is kind of, to me, that's kind of cool, because that means I've got, at least to them, a certain way of moving, a certain flow. So yeah, that's kind of the story behind my name. It was a Denny's drink. Next, this one comes from Ray Ray, b-boy my guy. He's actually one of my students, and one of the most passionate people I know about breaking, and very, great student, great listener, great, yeah, just overall great student, and really happy to see his growth in dance and everything. So shout out to Ray. He asks, when you practice or train, what brings you into that in the moment state of mind? And I know this is something that me and him have worked on in some of our sessions, and I think this is something that a lot of people maybe struggle with. And it's something that doesn't come overnight, and maybe doesn't come over a day or a week or months or years. It takes years, maybe. And it all depends on how you approach things and kind of what your goals are within the dance too. Why do you dance? I think one of the best ways to get into that in the moment state of mind is to relieve yourself of any judgment from outside sources. And so that can kind of come in a couple of different ways, I think. So one is you stop caring about what other people think, and you just purely dance for yourself. It doesn't matter what other people say. You dance how you want to dance, and that will allow you to kind of create freely in the moment and do what you want to do. The other kind of end of that, I think I had this a bit when I was younger, was so instead of not caring what other people think, you do that in a different way, and you kind of either trick yourself that, and it's kind of like the breaking mentality of, I'm better than everyone, I'm the best here. And either you tell yourself that or you are. But if you kind of come into a battle or a cipher or whatever with that mentality, then it kind of doesn't matter what you do. You feel like you can do anything. Now the other part of that is that you have to have the skill that matches that. So if you have that mentality but you suck, like people are gonna say stuff, or they're gonna do things, or they're gonna call you out, and you're gonna get smoked, and that'll be embarrassing for you. But that's a good lesson to learn too. But it's kind of like the other side is that your skill has to match up these things. So yeah, but if you're doing it on the other side of things, where you just don't care what other people think, and you're doing it for yourself, your skill kind of matters less. But then you've got to be okay with whatever people do say and that kind of thing. And that it's easy to say like I don't care, but in practice it's actually kind of hard. And I think that kind of takes time, and just really thinking about why you're dancing and who it's for. Is it for you, or is it for other people? Is it for other people's approval? Is it for status? Or is it for whatever? Or is it purely for you and your own sort of whatever mental, spiritual journey kind of thing like that, and just connecting with the music? But I think that's a huge way that you can get into that state of mind, is really thinking about why you're dancing, and really dancing for yourself rather than for other people. In the long run, I think that'll help. Hopefully that answered it. Yeah, and the last part too is have the skills to back it up. So that's where training comes in, and being physically able to do the things that you want to do, so then it doesn't put those mental blocks in there, and you can freely flow, and it goes uninterrupted because your physical ability matches where you want to go mentally. So hopefully that answered your question. So the next one also comes from Ray. He says, how do you feel when you judge a jam versus when you are judged at a jam? And I think those are kind of two very different things, right? when you're at a jam, you enter a jam, you're being judged. And number one is, yeah, you got to deal with that judgment. So you can either decide to take that to heart and really play to what people are, what you think they want to see versus what you want to do. And you got to make a decision about that. Me personally, I never want to compromise how I dance for the sake of winning a competition, for the sake of what some judge might think. And that's me personally. I don't enter competitions. I enter them, yeah, like a bit of, or at least when I was younger especially, it was a bit of like, okay, test my skill and see where I'm at. And that's still kind of part of it too. The other part is just to kind of challenge myself as well. But now, especially that I'm older and you know, it's, you kind of give up, or it just becomes less important. You stop caring about the chase for status and being the best. And it's more, at least for me, it becomes more about just, well, can I still dance and express myself in the moment? And sometimes like the best opportunities are in battles, depending on the kind of jam that you're at, or the people that you know, or whatever. You know, like in Japan it can be very crowded, so a lot of times like the only chance you really get to dance is in the battles. So yeah, so it's kind of like there's a choice that you have to make there when you're being judged. When you judge a jam, you are hired specifically to give your opinion on these things. So you have to have an opinion, and you have to, there's more pressure in a lot of ways, because you know, if you lose, like, who cares about that other than you and your crew, and maybe some of your, I don't know if you have fans, or if you have people, you know, supporters, family and friends. But when you're judging a jam, you have everyone watching your decision. So that's all the competitors, that's the promoter, that's the spectators, everyone is, maybe even other judges, like, they're watching your decision, and your decision matters for the jam. It makes a huge impact. So there's a lot of pressure on a judge to make calls, and that's the thing, is when you're a judge and you have a differing opinion than whoever, it can turn into things like what we've seen recently, where people get annoyed with the decision and decide to call you out, or you know, people talking crap online and that kind of thing. And in a sense, at the end of the day, if you're being honest with yourself, and you know, you believe that your beliefs, that what you know, your knowledge is credible, then it kind of doesn't matter what people say, and it doesn't matter what people do after the battle, if they call you out or that kind of thing. Like, knowledge is knowledge, skills are skills. There's some relation, but they're kind of different, right? So we'll come back to this kind of topic. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure, a different kind of pressure as a judge versus when you are competing and being judged. The next question comes from Karthik, who asks, who are some of the crews or B people in Japan who've caught your eye? Yeah, so I haven't had a huge chance to travel a lot, but you know, Japan has their famous people internationally, so people like, you know, Ayumi and Kazuki Rock and Narumi from Body Carnival. And then there's a bunch of the people that are in the crew that don't necessarily travel as much, or they don't get as much exposure one-on-one. This is only when the crew travels. There's like Foundation, and you know, everyone knows them, and Wing Zero, and Issei and, you know, everyone, right? Dragon, I think that's his name. And these are the crews and the people that get opportunities, or they do it themselves and they want to compete outside of Japan. And that's why they're known more internationally. But there's a ton of people in Japan that are really dope that you don't really see very often because they don't travel as much, or they don't travel at all. So some of the crews that I've seen recently, I found out about this crew called Sweet Coast Kobe. What is their name? Sweet Coast Kobe Break Boys, or Break Girls, Break Boys. Sweet Coast Kobe Break Club. I forget what it is. They're from Kobe, and I really like these dancers. They've got that sort of traditional style, but it's a lot of details, and it doesn't look like traditional in the sense of it's more focused on like top rock footwork, freezes kind of thing, and flow and that kind of thing, and less on blow-ups and flips and power and dynamics and things like that. Not to say that that's not traditional, it's just whatever. They've got really nice flow. This one guy, I always forget how to say his name. Shika? I forget. Cica. He's really dope. And yeah, some other guys in their crew, I forget their names, but they're all really good. I like those guys. They've got a kind of, especially in Japan, a unique way of moving and approaching the dance, and I feel like they're actually dancing and they're actually paying attention and connecting with the music and that kind of thing. This is just my opinion, but yeah, a lot of crews in Japan, a lot of dancers in Japan get kind of focused on the moves and just going fast and doing things hard, whether the song is hard or not, that kind of thing. But yeah, Sweet Coast Kobe, B-boys and B-girls, they're dope. Coffee Shop Squad in Fukuoka, they're really dope too. I think they've traveled a bit, like in Asia, Korea, and maybe some other places, I think, but yeah, not as much as say some of the big crews. But those guys are really dope, and like I like them because not only their approach to the dance, but also just kind of what they do for the community in like Kyushu and Fukuoka. Like they're about the culture, and I respect that too. And same thing with the Kobe people. Like they're about the culture as well. Like competitions are great, and that's a way of expressing things through the dance, but there's also the community, the cultural aspect of things like fashion and art and music and things like that, and you know, they represent that really well in Fukuoka and Kyushu in general. And speaking of Kyushu, there's also 9 states b-boys, which is, you know, Kyushu means 9 states, so they're 9 states b-boys. So people like Kyohei too, and Ayumu, and yeah, there's a bunch of others. And they're really dope, and they are another crew that kind of puts the focus on like dancing and listening to the music. And yeah, so I've really enjoyed meeting those guys and yeah, just kind of vibing with them at parties and things like that. Some other crews that I really like, it's not necessarily a crew, but it's kind of a scene, and it's the Nagoya scene. There's a lot of different people and a lot of different crews, and I've met a lot of them for whatever reason. A lot of them moved to Vancouver, so I've had a chance to connect with a bunch of them there. But Nagoya is, like, in my opinion, is one of like the best dance scenes in Japan, in the sense that it's not a breaking scene. They have a breaking scene, they have a popping scene, they have a like community or whatever. But they also have just like the dance community, and in a lot of ways it reminds me of Vancouver and how Vancouver has all these different scenes, but partially because it's so small, like everyone kind of knows each other and everyone kind of dabbles in everything, and there might not be the most original, crazy, high-level people, but there's a lot of high-level like dancers, and they'll make you feel the music, that kind of thing. And yeah, they're also kind of people that focus on the cultural aspect, like, and kind of where breaking, where hip hop comes from is like that party atmosphere. So some of my first experiences with Nagoya are they had a series, they do it once a month, called Night Cruising, which is like a kind of late night-ish party kind of thing where they have some dance performances, but in general it's just like a night at the club and everyone can dance and have fun like all night. I think it's one of those things in Japan where they go to like 6 a.m. or something, 5 a.m. So yeah, like they're about the culture. Some of the jams that I've been to, they try different interesting things. So like, for example, there's a jam called Volcano in Nagoya, thrown by, I think it's thrown by Wuta from Yellow Suns. And if you don't know who Wuta is, okay, that's another specific person from Nagoya. If you don't know who he is, look him up. He's one of my favorite dancers from Japan. So there you go, there's a specific person to look up from Nagoya. But he has a jam called Volcano, and the way that works is like, I think when it gets to the top 8 or top 16 or whatever they do after prelims, the judges can vote after any round. And it's like, you could do one round, technically. They can do one round, and if a judge is like, it's done, I don't need to see anymore, they can vote, technically. They probably won't do that, but let's say it's a 5-round battle, and it's 3-on-3, and 3 people go, and they see all 3 people are way higher on this side than this side, they can vote after 3 rounds, and it's done. They call it the guillotine system. So that's kind of cool, I thought. And it just kind of makes things more hype to watch. So yeah, those are some of the people that I've come across. There's a whole lot more, and there's so many people that are just really good and really cool people. And yeah, I mean, Japan's got such a big scene that there's so much more that you don't see, that only happens kind of in Japan. And for whatever reason, people take a lot of videos, but there's very few people who upload their footage. It's kind of weird. I don't really get it. Yeah, so when you get a chance, you gotta come to Japan and just check out some of the scenes and check out meet the people and participate in some of the I guess the nightlife or the parties and that kind of thing, like the social aspect of breaking. It's not all about just the competition, that kind of thing. So yeah, there you go. Next one comes from Jake Finesse. Can't remember if that's the name that you go by or if that's just your Discord name, but anyway, it comes from Jake Finesse, and he asks, breaking is almost entirely consumed through watching battles or exchanges. Without those exchanges regularly happening, what else can we b-boys and b-girls create, or would you like to see created? I think that's a really good question, because as we saw with like the pandemic and people not being able to participate in these things, like I think a lot of people's worlds kind of crumbled. Like that was who they are, is a dancer and a b-boy or a b-girl, and if they can't do that, then their identity comes into crisis. And this is something that I've talked about in a recent interview with, say, Crazy Smooth, which you'll see later once I finish editing it, is this idea of, yeah, like people's identities can sometimes be tied very intimately to this idea of like a b-boy or a b-girl. And like I said, if you don't get the chance to do that, it's hard to, like, who are you? So some of the things that I like to see, and I'm trying my best to create these things, is like everything that's outside of the dance itself, that's what you see in a video, in a battle. So things like discussions on, like judging, discussions on history, discussions on mentality. You know, it can even be things like discussions on training. You know, I think there's so many things that are related to dance that people are maybe interested in, but everyone just gets tunnel vision on dance competition. I gotta train to win this thing, and like, what does that even mean? So I think I would love to see more discussions on these kinds of things, and more just content creation, interesting content creation from the breaking community. So I would love to see high-level people, high-level judges do basically like reaction videos, and here's a battle, okay, I'm gonna break down why I thought this person won, why this person lost, that kind of thing. I think that would be invaluable to people to learn, to get into the mind of like what this person is thinking, why the judge voted this way and why they didn't vote this way. And yeah, so stuff like that. I also, so then the next part is related to that. Next question is related to that. Mr. Spoons. He says, how do you see breaking adapting to the remote tech world? So again, relating back to that last question, I see more people hopefully creating quality content for YouTube, or wherever they make it, YouTube, Instagram, however people can consume it, podcasts. Hopefully it's quality and people stick with it. But the other thing that I've always wanted to see, that I think is severely lacking in the breaking community, but some people have done it, and again, this takes time and investment, and sometimes that's your own personal investment, but I would love to see more streaming of events. You know, I've followed the fighting game community for a long time. You know, one of the first ones that I really got into was like Street Fighter 3, Third Strike, way back. And, you know, just following the fighting game community and how they're not really esports, and they're not really like super corporate. They're kind of like this grassroots movement that they have their own way of doing things, and it kind of reminds me of the breaking community in a lot of ways. But when you see their streams, like, yeah, they can post clips and things like that of you know, the top 8 and this kind of thing, and they have commentators and whatnot. But part of like a good live stream is it gives you an idea of kind of the vibe of the event, and it's kind of that one of those things where you can't be there, but you can get an idea of being there. You can feel like you're kind of there even though you're not. And I think breaking is just now starting to get into this, and I think a lot of stuff has been through partnerships with, like, say, Stance, I think. So I saw it with Massive Monkee's day, with Profo and Arc, and they were hosting things, and it was great because in between the battles, they didn't commentate, they just showed the battles. And then afterwards, they were able to make some comments, or I think maybe they even had some like sort of replay, whatever, but they could break down certain things that they saw, and that's where the commentary can kind of come in handy a lot more, is in between the battles. I don't like commentary over battles. I don't think it's very useful. I think it's just very distracting. But in between battles, I think it's great. And if you can blend that kind of thing between being entertaining and hyping things up, and also having some analytical stuff of kind of diving deep and knowing how to balance those two, like edutainment kind of stuff. I think you can have a great time in between battles. And then when it's like break time, cypher time, whatever you want to call it, that's when they did a good job with, like, you know, they have some person and they brought them in to do a little interview. So they had Flag, and just talking to him about, it was like mini interviews, like, I don't know, they had like 10 minutes. But a lot of people have a lot of interesting things to say if you just give them the opportunity. And I thought that was great. I would put on a stream like that if I had the time. Like, I'm over here in Japan, and I would totally do that if I can't make it to some jam and I want to watch something. I want to watch some competition, but also get some interesting insight into things. So yeah, I think that's one thing that I would love to see more, is quality streams. I think Hip Obsession in France, they do that really well too, but I think they get like government funding, and they basically plan that jam every year and everything goes into that. So they put in a lot of work from what I know. Right, so the next question comes from Waylon, and it's thoughts on calling out and battling the judges. So for anyone that doesn't know, about a month ago, it's kind of late, but yeah, I'm late on this Q&A thing. If anyone doesn't know, about a month ago, this guy from Rad called out a bunch of the judges at this event in Texas, I think. And for some reason, I'm not really sure why, but for some reason this was a big controversy, and there was a lot of talks of respect and you know, should he have done it, shouldn't he have done it, and it's disrespect to the judges, or it's disrespect to the promoter, and this kind of thing. And like, to my knowledge, this has always been a part of the culture, that calling out the judges, calling out whoever, it just happens. So I don't know why this was like suddenly a controversy. And from what I know, the guy even asked the promoter, like, is this going to interrupt the flow of the jam? Is there time to do this? And they were okay with it, as far as I know. So like, on that end, I don't really see what's so controversial. On the other end, I also don't see what calling out the judges really proves. I've always been, and me and Profo, I've talked about this in our interview. If I lose, I'm not gonna push that blame outward. I'm gonna look at what I did. Maybe I was right, maybe I did beat them, but in that sense, like, I'm not gonna be like, you know, you robbed me, fuck the judges, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm gonna take that loss and I'm gonna use it as a lesson, like a source of growth. So if I really want to, my goal is to win the competitions and stuff like that, and I'm not winning them because the judge isn't respecting what I do, then I'm gonna take that and use it as fuel to just try and become even better, to make it even more clear that there's, if it was one of those close battles and this person edged it out and they won, then I didn't make it clear enough that I won. So I'm going to use that as fuel to push even harder. That's if I want to, if my goal is to win competitions. The other thing is that me personally, I just don't, that's not what my goal is in the dance. So whatever. So the next thing that you kind of get into is kind of this stuff with skills, person's skills versus their skills on the dance floor versus skills as a judge. And those don't always necessarily translate. You can have someone who's really good as a dancer, but horrible judge. And you can have someone who's maybe not as skilled on the floor, or maybe they're past their prime and they can't do it anymore, but their mind is really good for details and picking out things and just seeing the kind of bigger picture or whatever. And I think like it's kind of hard to translate beating someone on the floor equating to exposing their views as a judge. And there's kind of like, they don't really go together. They kind of do, but they don't. So, you know, in that sense, I kind of feel like you're calling out the judge. Your views on what is important in judging is, I don't know, like you're not seeing that connection or that disconnect. I mean, that judging ability is kind of separate in a lot of ways from skills on the dance floor. So you call them out, and even if you beat them and you're better than them, and everyone unanimously decides that you beat them, that doesn't necessarily prove that they don't know what they're talking about as a judge. And then the other part too is that, like, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna reverse their decision? I don't know. It's just, that's not gonna happen. Nothing's gonna change from there. And to me, it's more, the best thing to do is just humble yourself and accept the loss and come back the next time stronger. But you know, that's just my view, and some people have been brought up different ways, and you know, and people value different things, you know. So if someone feels wronged, the way that they learn is to settle it on the dance floor, and that's how a lot of stuff gets settled in breaking. And if that's how you were brought up, that's how you're going to settle it. And that's been a part of the culture since, I don't know, the beginning of time. And yeah, so I don't really necessarily see an issue with it as long as it's not affecting the jam. And if the promoter was like, okay, and the judges are willing to do it, like, that's on them, you know. I don't know, it's kind of complicated, right? Depends how much you want to talk about it and discuss it. At the end of the day, it's just dance, and you know, if people want to do it, let them do it. Or they'll find the time, whether it's after the jam, in the parking lot, that kind of thing. There's time and a place, and some times are better than others, but hindsight's always 20/20, right? In the heat of the moment, especially younger people, and they've got something to prove or whatever. I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal. All right, and the last question is, what have you noticed about the difference in styles from around the world after traveling for so long? Are there things that some countries, areas prefer to do in your opinion? And this one comes from, again, Mr. Spoons. Number one, like, I'm not like a world traveler. I've been to a decent amount of places and things like that, but again, like, not long enough to really get a real idea of what a certain city style or a country style is, whatever, and that kind of thing. And I think just now, with the state of how the world is with the internet and things like that, these differences are less obvious, but I think they're still there. Yeah, like, so for example, some of the things that I've noticed, so I'll talk about Canada first from my experience. So the big place that everyone knows about in Canada is Toronto, and from what I've seen and experienced, like, Toronto is very intricate. They're very focused on being different from each other, even though there's kind of a Toronto aesthetic, which is a lot of threads and a lot of flowing and a lot of like kind of pretzels and things like that, but they all do it in their own way. So there's kind of like a Toronto quote-unquote style, and some people lean heavier into that than others. Yeah, so it's very flowy, very focused on I want to be different than this other person in the city, that kind of thing. And Toronto is very like competitive minded. It's very like I want to be the best, that kind of thing, and I want to prove that I'm the best. And so because of that competition, I think that grew the level really high. But it's can be very competition focused in a lot of ways. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of like culture and, you know, parties and community stuff that goes on in Toronto. But when it comes to, say, breaking, people can be, yeah, like I want to be the best, that kind of thing, which in comparison to a place like Vancouver, where I'm from, Vancouver, yeah, there's competitive people, but for whatever reason, it might be a West Coast kind of thing. We're a lot more laid back, or people don't care, or they're just less obvious, and maybe people talk shit about people behind their back or whatever that kind of thing is. But I kind of don't think that's maybe like a young mentality. Most people, from my experience, just want to dance and have fun, and you can see it in the kinds of events that happen in Vancouver, where like street dance festival, or, you know, before there was Big Trouble in Little Vancouver, and a lot of other jams where there's NON Anniversary is another example, Filthee Feet Anniversary when we still did it. Actually, we only did it one time. But Floor Horsemen, these kind of things, like there's a big emphasis on making things fun, parties, ciphers, like community, getting people who are even like non-dancers to enjoy dance, or connecting different dance communities, and, you know, having poppers want to come to a breaking event, and having b-boys and b-girls want to go to like I don't know, like a hustle event, or, you know, that kind of thing. And it's not necessarily catering to one single crowd, and that's got its pros and cons, but, you know, these are kind of differences in the communities, I guess. And Vancouver kind of has this, I think this became really clear. It's in an interview with a younger guy named Severin, and he kind of made this really clear in my mind, that like Vancouver doesn't have a particular aesthetic, it doesn't have a style in its per se, but because it's not constrained into like what is or isn't Vancouver style and way of moving, people are free to just like do whatever they want, and you know, people are free to do that wherever they are, but there's just even less constraint, because it's like you don't have any expectations to live up to, because there are no expectations. No one cares about what Vancouver style is and that kind of thing. So I think it's allowed people to just have lots of really completely varied styles within the community. So I think that's really cool. Speaking more internationally, like let's say living in Japan, one thing that I've noticed, and here's the thing too, that anything that I say here is generalizations. Like, it's very hard to have whatever I say apply to everyone within that community or country or city or whatever, because like at the end of the day, people are individuals, and they have their own ways of doing things and their own approaches and stuff like that. There's little details and little things that will maybe, it's what you're surrounded with, so that's the way you move or that kind of thing. But yeah, it's always kind of hard to make these generalizations. So take whatever I say with a grain of salt. So speaking about Japan, And this again depends on what part of Japan you're talking about, but I guess like overall aesthetics, one thing that I've noticed is Japan goes like very hard on things. It's like you don't do things softly, you do it hard. You do it like full speed, there's one speed and it's fast and in general. And people put like 110% into every movement that they do, which can be good if the music is hype and that kind of thing. But sometimes when you see it with like a slower song or like a hip-hop kind of song, it's like some people don't know how to like groove to that. And you can say that about a lot of different places, not just Japan. But that's one thing that I've noticed, like Japan is very like go, 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 and do it hard. And from what I can tell, a lot of people are very set oriented. But that's not to say that there aren't people who are really in the moment, and those people, when I've seen them, they are really incredible. And there's some people who blend the two really well as well. But there's a lot of really talented like dancers, and then a lot of people with really high skill level, and there's some people who blend the two. So kind of what I just said, it applies to anywhere, and nothing I said really had any meaning. But that's kind of what I've noticed about Japan. Let's see, other places that I've been to. Yeah, I've been to a few places in the US, and you know, I think it's always, like I said, it's hard to say exactly how to define a style or something like that, especially in today's age with the internet being so prevalent. Like, you know, I don't want this to come off as like, oh, back in my day kind of thing, but in the early days, before the internet, it's kind of like you are a product of what you're exposed to and what you're surrounded by. And so in the early days when you didn't have the internet, and even before my time when you didn't even have like VHS and DVDs and things like that you could buy, you literally had the people around you, and if you were one of the people that was motivated or had the money to do it and travel, you saw different things, right? And maybe that's one of the reasons why travel became such a big part of the breaking experiences. Like, it just opens your mind up to so much more than what this small little bubble that you're surrounded by. And then with the advent of the internet, you know, it was kind of like this gradual thing with VHS stuff, and okay, well now you can see stuff from different countries if whatever shop was lucky enough to have it, or when people started selling stuff online, you could get videos and things like that. But yeah, it was this gradual thing where now we're at the age of the YouTube age, where you have a jam, and then the next day or within a week, all the battles are up. You can see them at any time. You can watch them as many times as you want on your computer, on your phone, on your tablet, on your TV, wherever you want. You can slow it down, you can rewind it, you can pause it, you can do all this stuff. You can send it very easily to someone else, and then they can see it. And it's like the spread of information of ideas is so fast now, that, and people are exposed to so much, that it's kind of the issue that a lot of people complain about now, is that everyone kind of looks the same, which I do and don't agree with. Because if you look at some of the old footage, there's the people that stand out, and then there's all the other people who don't stand out, who are the same, dancing the same way. They are very similar. It's kind of just, sometimes people look back with like rose-tinted glasses, and this happens with every single thing that's been going on for a while that has multiple generations included in the culture, in the community. People they like what they grew up with, and there's a certain connection to the things that they were exposed to early on, and people can have a nostalgic connection to whatever it is, whether it's relevant now or not. Yeah, you gotta kind of step outside of that and just think about, like, is this actually good, or is it just good because I have a memory of it and I have fond memories of growing up and watching this thing? Like, so that's always something to consider when we're talking about the internet age and different styles and what things are like now. And it's just different. I think that's kind of what it is. And there's good things and bad things about it. And maybe people are more similar, but there's other trade-offs that happen with that. Skill level got higher, or the people that truly are different really stand out more, maybe. And maybe this is things like ebb and flow, and so maybe we're on a trend now of people getting sick of people looking very similar or doing all the same kind of stuff, and you're gonna have people maybe hide their stuff more because they don't want to be seen so much and have such a big online presence that when they do show up, it's gonna mean more. And maybe that's the trend that we're on now, or that's the future trend or something like that. And it's always that kind of thing. Things get oversaturated and people want to do something different, and then that gets oversaturated and then people want to do something different, and then that gets, and it's cycles and cycles and cycles. We're doing the same thing that we've been doing for years and years and decades and centuries, just in a different way, in a different time. But it's all kind of doing the same stuff. So, yeah. That's what I've noticed traveling, if that makes any sense. If you made it to this point in the video, thanks for watching everything, and I really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the questions that people had. So a big shout out to all my Patreon supporters and people that are actively participating on the Discord channel and getting a lot of discussions, and I hope that people get something out of it, but it's also good for me because I get to see what people are thinking, and I always want this to be a two-way thing, that I give my thoughts, and I would love to see your thoughts on any of these questions in the comments, or whatever. So it's a discussion. It takes two people, two or more. So again, thank you to everyone who has supported, and if anyone's out there that likes what I'm doing and likes the content that I'm creating, please feel free to head over to Patreon and show some support. If that's something that you're interested in, or if you just want to support me and what I'm doing, head over there and yeah, donate. Even $1 is fine. Like, it doesn't, I'm always happy with anything. You can donate 1 penny, 2 pennies, 50 cents, $100. It's up to you. I don't care. Everything is appreciated. So thank you all for listening to me ramble on for a long time, and I hope you got something out of it. And we'll see you next time. Peace.